This episode of the Major Issues Podcast is brought to you by ComicBook Clique at tpublic.com. Visit tpublic.com/user/comicbookclique to get exclusive one-of-a-kind merchandise, including shirts, stickers, and phone cases, all designed by us. Get your hands on the latest and greatest in comic book merchandise by going to tpublic.com/user/comicbookclique. And remember, you, yes you, are worthy. Hello everybody out there in comic book land. My name is Jason Wingard, aka The Mastermind, and if you're going to be here for one reason. That's a brand new episode of The Inner Circle brought to you by the Hellfire Club. And as always, I am never alone. Sir, please introduce yourself.
I am Jean Grey's final continue, Gregory Thomas, aka GT Rebirth.
GT Rebirth is here in studio, and he's looking at me kind of funny because I think he's realized I am not Jason Wingard. My name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don, and if you're listening to this, you could only be here for one reason. That's a brand new episode of the Major Issues Podcast, brought to you by Comic Book Clique. I wonder how many people shut off once they're like, wait, Jason
I can't
Wingard.
imagine. I don't know. He doesn't clue me into these lines. I have no clue what's happening, but I don't tell him mine either. So.
Well, I figured, illusions were the name of the game today.
Yeah, I guess they are.
Because this episode is a very special episode. We'll be tackling the infamous, right, well-regarded Dark Phoenix Saga in preparation for the Dark Phoenix movie. Now, how, I guess, excited are you for that Dark Phoenix movie? Are you trepidatious at this point?
I am about 3% excited.
3% excited?
I have not super into this.
Okay.
To be completely transparent, like, I have never really given Apocalypse my full watch, but I know it's not great.
It's not great. Yeah.
I didn't have expectations going into it to begin with.
Okay.
Which is sad because technically, like, the last 3 X-Men films I've actually sat down and watched, I all thought were really good.
Okay. So you're talking about like Days of Future Past, First
Class, Days of Future Past, Logan, all really good. Even if you want to throw Deadpool in there.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, first Deadpool, really good. Second Deadpool, still pretty good.
Right.
It's a lot of the same, but, like, it's a flavor. You know what I mean? So, it's almost a shame that I feel like it fell right off its next peak.
Yeah.
Which, granted, there are not many...
Next and last, right? Like, we're about to get ready to close the chapter on these films.
Until New Mutants escapes from the vault.
Whenever that happens, right? Whenever they sneak out of that. Me and Dan the Comic Man went through the entirety that is the X-Men film franchise. But I guess getting your fresh take on it, where do you start your fandom, if you have any, or affection towards the X-Men? Is this did you find yourself watching the shows growing up, the video games? Are you a Marvel vs. Capcom guy? That's where.
Not so later. Definitely Fox Kids. 5 days a week. All the time, same theme song, same intro.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Looking back, that show was dense.
Oh, yes. Especially since the first season is almost all 2 or 3 parts, stories.
Yes. And a lot of them are taken straight from the comics.
Yeah.
With dialogue and scenes ripped out with usually just odd choices of changing in between, but probably that's more for sponsors or whatever the heck they're dealing with.
Sponsors, or we couldn't exactly get a grab of this character, so we have to throw another one in there.
When watching the show, did you watch this arc in particular growing up? Do you remember the whole Jean Grey wigs out and people gotta kind of put her down storyline?
It's one of the ones that's always stuck with me, if I'm honest. Okay. I always remembered the Dark Phoenix Saga was kind of like, you can tell when a TV show takes an arc as a big deal. Yeah. Compared to the rest of its season. Like, they want you to pay attention to every single episode, but obviously some things get a little higher pedestal than others, and I remember this one specifically for that. Yeah. This was like, this is our big arc, and things are dire, and pay big attention to this.
I was trying to do some homework. I think, and I love hyperbole, but I think that this may be the most adapted storyline.
It may be.
In comic history?
We have a season of X-Men the animated series. We've got one movie before. We've got one movie coming very soon down the pipe.
They did an X-Men Evolution.
I was going to say I didn't watch X-Men Evolution, but I assume they tried.
You weren't with the whole edgy teenster.
You can call it edgy as much as you want, but for me,
you knew they were placing Hoobastank in the background, bro. That show.
Crawling in the dark.
Hey man, everybody had their Hoobastank moment.
Listen, that's fine. For me, going into it, it was like I'd already been attached to a bunch of these characters in one format, and then when you told me they were teenagers, I was just like, I don't want to go backwards.
I feel you. Yeah.
And I sometimes struggle with going backwards with especially even when it's a new timeline or a new show or whatever. Like,
yes. Now
we have to go further back and do it again.
It's also very weird, especially with this, serialized storytelling. It's always weird to be like, and remember all that? That's gone. So now we're starting again. And it's like, wait, but that's mine.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I get this might be somebody's, but you didn't have to throw mine away to get
It's even worse with the movies, because then the movies want to do the thing where they're like, no, we're going to connect it to the good parts of our timeline.
Yeah. Like, forget the bad stuff.
The new Terminator movie.
Uh-huh.
It's technically like a spiritual sequel to Terminator 2.
Yeah.
The other 3 films didn't happen as far as that's concerned.
Look at Halloween, right? Halloween throws out, what, 10 probably movies or something like that? I
guess so, yeah. I mean, the Rob Zombie movie's a completely different timeline, but I guess the new one's supposed to be going backwards.
But goes backwards to after the first.
Everything new one does,
but right? The first, yeah.
Yeah, I did hear that.
And also the madness that the first movie's called Halloween and the second movie's called Halloween.
Right.
So
the new one with Jamie Lee Curtis and a shotgun.
Which is part 2, is just called Halloween.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
We're all confused.
Yes. But they've tried to fish this well dry. And now we are on the precipice of the maybe one of the final times they tried this in cinema.
I'm now really curious if the anime tried it.
Right. Oh, that's a good point. That's definitely a good point. I doing some more research. I went back because this came out in between January and October of 1980. Mm-hmm. To put that in retrospect, some of the biggest stories that we've heard of, that we've read in comic books, major issues, purports to cover the latest and greatest to come to comic books, comic book media. But this precedes Watchmen, which came out in 86.
It is not the latest, but it may be one of the greatest.
Yeah, it precedes The Dark Knight Returns. It precedes Secret Wars. It precedes Crisis on Infinite Earths. It precedes Infinity Gauntlet. Things that have been done ad nauseum.
Yes.
The Dark Phoenix was there first. And what's even more ironic is that I think we were looking at covers the other day off air, and there's a very distinct cover of Cyclops holding Jean Grey.
Yes.
Which, if you've seen enough comic book covers, reminded us of the Crisis on Infinite Earths cover of Superman holding Supergirl. But this would have predated that.
Yeah.
Old Psych Summers,
I saw that too, and I was just like, oh man. That hurts how I feel about that photo.
It's great. It's crazy, right? That was such an iconic image. And I mean, I guess anyone can hold anyone and seem in grief, but that was way too close for me.
No, it looks drawn and angled almost the exact same way. I will, before we even get started, I will purport actually that I think to some degree, and you can connect it to the books and even to the movies and the adaptations and every other attempt around it. The Phoenix Saga, whilst being one of the most notable things they've ever done, is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the Jean Grey character. And I don't mean in the traumatic sense of like what's happened to the character in story, but like the worst thing they have done editorially to the character, because now it's the only thing she is known for.
It's very definitive. It reminds me of The Void with Sentry.
Yeah.
No matter what story Sentry tells, you're just looking at your watch. Because the Void is coming, and they will fight.
That train is never late.
Exactly. They will fight. And you're right, it's the same thing with Jean. We're just waiting for the Phoenix shoe to drop. Even in the movie, I'm kind of like, we got a new Jean, but I'm already like, well, new Jean? What time?
Oh, we got a new Jean Grey? Fantastic. Time to get the bird.
Exactly. We got to get the Firebird.
We just met a bird.
Yeah.
Firebird.
That's it. Get to the Firebird.
It's like, so we have no Jean stories to tell. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah. Does that make Jean like almost a Jason Todd-esque character? Like,
at this
point, just tragic, just...
I mean, yes, it makes her tragic, but like she's always been tragic because all she is like she is the original. I mean, not the original, but like she is the archetype woman in the refrigerator.
Oh yeah, yeah.
She's seen life and death so many times that it's a running gag.
And she was the first female on the team.
Yeah.
And in comparison to her other cohorts, she wasn't ever viewed or portrayed as strong or as capable as the rest of the members of her team. And then when she's at the peak of capability, you almost have to kill her off, right?
Yeah.
Like so I guess
it went too far, and now it's like, well, now we have to get rid of her because it's too powerful. And then, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
It made everything Jean Grey almost even less interesting because you knew she could go to this higher level.
Yeah.
But we also can't keep her at that higher level because
she'll nerf everybody. Yeah.
You know, it's the Superman problem. It's like, what do you do if you've got Superman here? We don't need anyone else.
Yeah. And, it wasn't always, people who are familiar with Jean Grey understand that, for the most part, early on in her teachings at Xavier's school, she was, she had like light telekinesis,
mm-hmm.
And then eventually telepathy,
mm-hmm.
But nothing to like write home about.
No.
Like Xavier was constantly teaching her and stuff, but, eventually we were told in the great retcons of that comic books go through, that realizing that she was way too powerful, Xavier put mental blocks on her mind to kind of keep her at bay, and then eventually through a series of unfortunate events, those blocks end up being raised. Did you like Jean more when she was just kind of normal, or does the mental blocks add a layer of
when I'm searching the content, I never had a problem with Jean Grey. But I also probably didn't have a problem with it because she was the love interest of my favorite character, and I just it was a good thing to me.
Yeah.
Like, they were good together, and I liked it. My man Cyclops was the leader and my guy. So I never had an issue with Jean. I think if you went into X-Men like I did without absolutely no knowledge of the backstory, it's a lot less damning because Jean Grey is just like a regular good character for a bit and then gets the Phoenix thing and then it goes away.
Yeah.
You don't have all that backstory of her being like damseled and seemingly useless.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing is that sometimes she has that Martian Manhunter presence where her only job is to link all the teammates so that they can communicate.
Yeah. Yep. And she had that weird outfit in
the blue one?
The animated series, that weird forehead outfit.
Yeah. They liked a lot of those forehead outfits.
Yeah, they were just gonna let the hair hang out and the face hang out.
Yeah.
This will hide nothing of your face.
Gambit had a full-bodied suit all the way up to his cheekbones.
They really dug that. It
was weird.
Let's talk a little bit about the editorial side of the X-Men in general.
Summers must have been terrible.
Yeah, right? Could you imagine that tan? The X-Men made their debut in X-Men #1. They were created by our boys Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And and so they make their debut in September of 1963. Early X-Men issues introduced the OG team of Cyclops, Marvel Girl, aka Jean Grey, Beast, Angel, and Iceman, and doing some work. I was like, had Iceman appeared, we would have gotten all the OGs in this story.
Yes.
Because Angel makes an appearance, Beast makes an appearance as well, and then the story is basically about Marvel Girl and Cyclops.
Basically.
So I thought that was pretty cool. As well as introducing the team, they introduced the arch enemy Magneto and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, featuring Mastermind, who we'll get back to, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Toad. Do
you know what happens to a toad when struck by lightning?
I heard it was the same thing that happened to everything else.
I believe so too.
That guy only has like 4 lines in that whole movie. Poor thing.
He's supposed to keep saying something about that line, and so that punchline makes sense, but they deleted all those scenes.
That sounds like an X-Men film. The X-Men comics mostly focus on like good versus evil, but more about like prejudice and racism and being ostracized for your lot in life. A lot of social issues. And it's still about that in many different ways. But they ended up relaunching the X-Men in 1975 with giant-sized X-Men #1, and this is the X-Men majority of people know.
Yes.
It was brought back with writer Len Wein and Dave Cockrum, But we got a brand new international team that we spoke about a little bit in the last issue. It became a We Are the World of sorts with the X-Men, where you got Cyclops from America, Banshee's Irish, Sunfire, I believe, was Japanese, and Wolverine is Canadian.
Not Australian.
Storm is from Africa, Nightcrawler from Germany, Colossus from Russia, and Thunderbird is the most native of Americans.
Of course it is.
Yes. Thunderbird. And he was killed in the second issue.
Oh my god.
It's terrible.
He's Slipknot?
Yes. In the second issue of this new revamped team.
That's horrible.
That Cyclops is leading, they get got. They lose Thunderbird, so
of course they're led by the American.
It's terrible. Chris
oh god,
Claremont.
I just realized how much worse that is.
Yes, it is.
We got rid of the Native American in the second second issue.
Yeah,
we kept the white one as the leader.
Exactly. Yep. These are the only nationalities that matter. But I'm still. Hey, there's no one Hispanic on this team, by the way.
No one.
If you're looking through, there's no one Hispanic on this team. So they did their best. Writer Chris Claremont's first issue was number 94. We're gonna be talking a lot about him because a lot of this story and the long-term effects and the long-term booking, as us wrestling fans like to call it, all come from our man Chris Claremont. Yeah, so Claremont gets on a 94. Sunfire leaves, I believe in that. And then in 95, they kill Thunderbird. They introduce Moira McTaggart as a human ally and the former fiance of Xavier in 96. Marvel Girl becomes Phoenix in issue 101. And we deal with a lot of that stuff with the Shi'ar space people. And then Cockrum is replaced by penciler John Byrne as of 108. So that's where we get right around here. Okay. Right around where we're at. Because the Dark Phoenix Saga takes place between issues 129 and 138. But this was preambled by the Phoenix Saga, which took place in the early 100s, literally issue 100 and upwards.
Nice.
So when you look at it, this is really almost a year and a half's worth of storytelling, which is that's big business, especially now when they can't hold a story to save their lives for some reason. I don't understand where that's going with that. How do you feel about long-term booking, as we like to affectionately call it in the wrestling?
As long as it's good. It's something to hold on to. I think it's weird for those types of folks that like to how do you call it, trade weight?
Yeah.
Because you find yourself sometimes in a situation where take the new Captain America one with Ta-Nehisi Coates, your favorite name.
Yes. Which I won't be saying on this, but you can can go ahead. That's my superpower.
I think if you were to get volume 1 of his first trade of the Captain America book, it would probably still feel unfinished because the end of that trade isn't definitive.
Okay.
And we're still kind of working on the story that he's been doing since he started on the book.
Right.
So I can imagine if you're trade waiting, that is a frustrating experience.
Yeah.
Because I waited 6 months for this book, I got it, and it didn't do anything definitive at the end, and I have to wait for another. Whereas if you're doing it issue by issue, you're just following, the crumbs.
The story, right. I wonder if, I guess to do it in the most effective way, you would have to have little instant gratification payoffs.
Yeah.
While also working towards a bigger payoff that we don't know we want.
Right.
And that's obviously easier said than done.
But that's essentially the CW method.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just little,
every episode is a little payoff.
Little W's along the way while we're chasing this bigger issue.
Right. Yeah. Chris Claremont became famous for leaving plot elements for the future stories in his own work. The act became affectionately known as Claremonting, where a writer would set up his future stories by adding little elements in his current story. That reminded me of, there's a scene in this that has nothing to do with the Dark Phoenix Saga, where after the Hellfire Club is, basically destroyed, one of the members talks to homeboy from the first movie, Senator Kelly.
Okay.
And is like, so, about those Sentinels.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's going to go somewhere.
And it doesn't come up for the rest of the book, but it's I've got it.
Exactly. That's definitely a through line somewhere. I think that's very cool because it makes me think oh, maybe I should keep reading. Because although my story is done, the story I came for is done, I still have breadcrumb trails in various different directions that I can follow.
Or even if, even if when I finish this story, it's like there's still like, don't forget that hanging plot thread over there.
Yeah.
There's still things to finish.
Exactly, and a reason to continue the story. Then the comic series itself was changed from X-Men to the Uncanny X-Men with issue 114. How you like that Uncanny?
It's probably the most iconic name they've had. It's the one that gets parodied the most.
Yeah.
They did love all of their how do you say, buzzwords back then, but now we've gotten to the point where the names are just so iconic you can sell them on their own.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, you don't have to call them uncanny or incredible or amazing. It's
or
just
astonishing,
like,
right?
Right. You just go, Spider-Man, and they're like, I know that.
I know that guy. Yeah. And the thing is, like, although the X-Men were a very famous team, is this team. It's this team introduced in Giant Size #1 that really becomes, I mean,
yeah,
video game franchises, animated cartoons, trading cards, all kinds of craziness come from this
and
X-Men
all
run.
of the toys.
And all of the toys. And all the ridiculous costumes as well.
Books is just a giant toy business.
That's it. I wanted to ask you how you felt about 80s comic book exposition. Because I think we constantly talk, especially when we are coming up with new reading assignments, right? We really are trying to tackle some of the latest and greatest, but also some of the classics. And sometimes with these classics, sometimes they just don't have word bubbles. They just write on the page.
Right. And that's the worst.
And you can barely see what they're trying to write.
Especially when the conversion to digital just does not help you.
Yeah, it's not great. Sometimes there was times where I turned the page in this book and I'm like, there is so much writing on this page. Like, every box is filled to the brim with these speech or thought bubbles.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and some of the speech and thought bubbles are interconnected. So I can't, like, wait, did you stop talking?
Yeah, they're saying this, but they're thinking this, but now they went back to talking. What's going on here?
Everyone gets a thought bubble at the same time.
Yeah.
And I forgot how long this was going to take because I opened it up like, oh, okay, it's just 200 pages. Cool. I should be able to get this done in a week, maybe less than that, if I'm able to put the time into it. And every page not only has a speech bubble and a thought bubble, but a large narration box.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there is so much to read.
Yeah. Stanley was the one who said that every comic should read as if it was somebody's first. And so this is an 8-issue story? About an 8 to 9 issue story of them in every one of those stories acting like we haven't read the one before.
Yes.
So it gets a little bit rough in those areas. I will agree.
Yeah. It was a lot to sort of dredge through. A lot of word bubbling, a lot of thought bubbling, a lot of I've said a thing and now here's what I'm thinking to myself.
Yeah. Literally.
Now here's what the person I just said it to is also thinking.
We are the Jean Greys, right? We can see what everyone's thinking, and everyone is very well-spoken and and deliberate in their thoughts.
And it makes me never want to be a telepath.
Yes, everyone's very deliberate in their thoughts. You'll have like a speech bubble where Scott's like, I thought it was this way, but I guess it's this way. Maybe I am wrong, or maybe I'm right. I don't know. Maybe I should ask somebody. Nah, screw it. And it's like, and so in real time, nothing's happened.
No.
But while we're reading, he's had this entire conversation in his mind.
It was just in this moment.
Did you find that jarring at all? Did you find yourself rubbing up against that kind of?
I just found it making everything a lot longer than it could have been.
Okay.
And that made the experience, like, it made the book seem longer.
Yeah, I can agree. To get the full scope of this story, the Dark Phoenix Saga, let's do a little bit of background on Jean Grey. So, Jean's mutant powers of telepathy and telekinesis first manifested when her best friend is hit by a car and killed. Jean mentally links with her friend and nearly dies as well, which is madness. The event leaves her comatose, and she's brought back to consciousness when her parents seek help of a very powerful mutant telepath, Charles Xavier. Charles blocks her telepathy until she's old enough to be able to control it, leaving her with access only to her telekinetic powers, which explains why she could only do that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Xavier later recruits her as a teenager to be part of his X-Men team as Marvel Girl, the team's sole female member, and after several missions with the X-Men, Xavier removes Jean's mental blocks and she's able to use and control her telepathic powers. She begins a relationship with your boy, Cyclops.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the biggest like relationship between teammates that was going on at the time. But our story takes place roughly around issue 100, even though we're taking the Dark Phoenix Saga, which starts at 129, because around issue 100. There's an emergency mission to space, and the X-Men find their shuttle damaged. Jean pilots the shuttle back to Earth, but is exposed to fatal levels of radiation. Dying but determined to save Cyclops and her friends, Jean calls out for help and is answered by the cosmic entity, the Phoenix Force. First of all, I've asked for a lot of help to myself, and I've never been answered by a cosmic entity.
Nah. And if it was that one, I'd be like, okay, wait, I have questions.
Let's think about this real quick. But the Phoenix Force is like totally down, and even though it's the sum of all life in the universe, it's still moved by Jean's dedication and love, and merges with Jean's psyche, and she becomes a being of pure thoughts, and reforms herself upon Earth with a new power and identity,
and an outfit,
and a new costume, and she calls herself the Phoenix. It's funnier watching it in the animated series because they all think she dies. Like everything, it falls into the ocean, Jamaica Bay, and then she just rises up and like talks in comic book speak.
Right.
Like, fear me, X-Men.
I am Phoenix.
There's one part in the book where she goes, "We are quits," and I'm like, you can't say that's not something that you say in an evil speech. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're kaputs, X-Men. We're gonna. You can't. That's not. You can't say that. Yeah. So she kind of becomes the Phoenix. She is able to repair the fractured Macron crystal, but voluntarily restrains her powers afterwards to help them keep under control. All seems well until the villainous inner circle of the Hellfire Club gets involved. And the original intent of the Dark Phoenix storyline through the writers was to introduce Dark Phoenix as a cosmic nemesis for the X-Men. How do you feel about the idea of irredeemable Jean Grey? Like, from this story that we're reading today, she just becomes their next big bad aside from Magneto.
I guess it would be the probably the best thing you could have done for her long term, in the sense that, like, she would always be Phoenix, so she would always be the most interesting version of her character to the fan base.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. And if she was never important enough before to dive into the human nature, why do it now? Like, you understand? Yeah. Like, you've never cared before, so you could just keep not developing her now.
Yeah.
And people would just write it off as, well, she's a villain. What does it matter?
Instead of people just waiting before you push the Phoenix button again.
Yeah. Let's talk about Phoenix a little bit more. Jean Grey. Like I said, she was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and she was Marvel Girl for the most part. And as a sole female member, Marvel Girl was a regular part of the team through the series publication. But like I said, she couldn't really do much. It was under Chris Claremont, like I was talking about, that Jean underwent a significant transformation from the X-Men's weakest member to the most powerful. And the relationship between Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force is portrayed in a variety of ways. So initially, they wanted the Phoenix Force to be almost like a possession. Mm-hmm. Like the Phoenix Force is a separate entity.
Yes.
But many people and many, I guess you would call it, interpretations, mm-hmm. see it as the Phoenix is the dormant potential.
Okay.
The dormant potential of Jean Grey written large. Which do you prefer?
I sort of prefer the possession argument.
Okay.
Because it makes, I guess it's the one I'm used to, where it made the Phoenix in itself this enigmatic persona that is bigger than life and is sort of like, it has a mythology to it.
Yes, as we've seen in the Avengers 1000 BC. Like that,
that
force.
Was weird.
That force has been existing
and made out with Odin.
Yeah, as you do, I guess.
I guess
he was in love.
Using something.
Oh man! But, imagine that was Thor's mom. That would have been yeah.
But like it creates an interesting sort of mythology and pathos to the Phoenix and its cosmic place in the universe, instead of just, oh, it's a part of Jean, because you guys, she was important the entire time, even when we killed her off several times and nobody cared.
Without spoiling it, have you seen Umbrella Academy?
I have not.
Okay.
Not yet.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
So I like it as well. I guess where someone could rub up against it, in a wrong kind of way, or not dig it as much, is this idea that if they're separate, whatever she does as Phoenix is not Jean's fault.
That's certainly the direction he tried to go with it.
Yes, and so where do you fall on that? Even knowing that it's a separate entity, is Jean at fault? It's like I sold you a gun, and you went out and you did some kind of crazy massacre. I could have never sold you that gun, but was it in you the whole time? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
was that massacre in you the whole time?
I think there would be an arguably different situation between like you gave me a gun and I went out and fired it into a park, and then other than I was possessed by a dark entity in my sleep and it shot into a park, and then I was just like, wait, what happened?
Yeah, and they're like, arrest him! With his head.
I did what?
Yeah, like I said, they really wanted Phoenix to be Jean's true potential, because they wanted to create the first cosmic superheroine.
Yes.
As you sit there in a Captain Marvel hat. Which says a lot. Like, they could have went and did this early.
Yeah.
And also, it says, like last week when we did talking about the X-Men films in general, I said that it really sucks that Marvel did not have the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, because I feel like between the X-Men and Sue Storm,
Marvel Studios, we're saying.
Yeah, Marvel Studios. Between the X-Men and Sue Storm, those are the strongest women in the Marvel canon.
Yes. Arguably also Aurora Storm.
Yeah. Well, all the X-Men women. Aurora, I put Rogue in there. Yeah. You can put Emma in there. Shadowcat, Psylocke. Like, they have
Jubilee.
Anyway, they have they have strong women that stand up for themselves and are powerful in their own right. And Sue Storm, man, she's like top 5, and we have yet to see that portrayal of that character that can put Namor in place.
The X-Men, or in ergo the mutant community, was way ahead of the curve when it came to strong female characters.
Yeah, and I guess it's this idea that the X-Men were always supposed to be about the marginalized and those who don't seem to have the power that they they should be possessing. Let's talk about the leader of the team, Scott Summers. How did reading this comic make you feel about Scott Summers? You already came in with preconceived notions that he's the man. Did you leave with your mind changed?
No, I didn't leave with my mind changed at all. Scott is the intrepid leader of the X-Men for me still, and I felt he acted like it. There was that weird weird fatherly issue with him and Xavier in the beginning.
Yeah.
But apparently Xavier's got issues with, attachments.
I did find that pretty cool. This idea that he's like, I dig what you did, but like, this is my X-Men team now. Like, they're not going to just respond to the crazy, 10 points off Gryffindor. Like, no one's going to respond to that anymore. You understand? You can't just randomly give people demerits. Like, you try to give Wolverine a demerit.
I saw that. I was just like...
And Cyclops he's not going to
care about demerits.
He's not going to listen to that. You know he has claws, right?
He barely cares about the curfew.
Yeah, that was definitely not going to work. But they seem to respect him. They believe in him. They respect him. He's always first out there, first to fight.
Yes. Which is why I was so disappointed when I found out what they had done to him so many years later.
Reading this now, how do you feel about the ending? His demise in Last Stand.
I still don't understand his demise in Last Stand.
Yeah, right? Like, what story were you trying to tell without Cyclops?
I remember sitting in the theater watching it and just going like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
Did they just... Oh,
she kisses him, his face goes a little wiggly, and then it's all over. It's all gone.
They just killed Cyclops.
Yeah.
I also just am not really... I get it from a story standpoint, but I also struggled with the, radicalized Cyclops.
Okay. The mutant leader, the renegade mutant leader, kind of?
Yeah.
Like the radical mutant leader, I should say. Yeah.
Full-on tyrant bad guy.
But I guess, there's only so much you can deal with, right? Before you're just like...
I totally get it from a writing standpoint. It just hurt a little.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they might be putting him back on board. Are you hyped for House of X?
I'm. I don't know if I'd say I'm hype. I'm interested.
I do want a jumping on point. I've been reading little by little, famous X-Men stories, and I dig them all. But it's just the issue that I haven't mastered yet.
Right.
Of the X-Men, and so I'm hoping that this jumping on point by Jonathan Hickman and Marvel is really gonna be.
I've always struggled with it because I only know the one team, so then it's like when you give me several X-Men books that I don't know which one to read, and then even when you give me the one X-Men book, I'm like, okay, I have to figure out where we got here.
Yeah.
And who's here and why not.
We have Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, on the team.
The Incredible Nightcrawler.
I think the most interesting thing about him in this is that they spoke about an image inducer, Supergirl style, that can make him into a normal person.
Yes.
And he's not with it. Like he probably used it a couple times, but now that Xavier's not around, that he thinks he's like, nah, I'm not down for this. Kind of empowering, right? Like considering he has like 3 fingers on each appendage and blue hair and blue skin. Mm-hmm. And he smells like rotten eggs when he when he poofs, when he bamps. But yeah, I think that says a lot about that character. I think he's a delight in the whole issue or the whole story, constantly cracking jokes.
He is, and it's funny because like he's the object of conversation in the line that Mystique says in that sense in the movie, where it's just like because you shouldn't have to. Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't have to be changing. You could be anyone you want. You could be the prettiest, normal-looking white girl. Like, no, you shouldn't have to.
Exactly. And I also liked how they just threw between him and Colossus. They would just throw in random German words.
Yeah.
through all their dialogue, and I'm like, oh, I'm learning. I feel like I'm learning a thing.
Fraulein.
Yeah, you got Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, who I think he's pretty tame in this. I don't think he does anything.
Colossus is sort of like I don't want to call him the point of view character, but he's sort of the most human.
He's a good old boy, ain't he?
Yeah, he's just like
a good old boy.
He's just a good guy. He loves his family. He writes back home.
He works hard. He's
probably
loyal.
The most relatable guy because it's like I'm just a normal dude that can turn to steel.
Yes. How do you feel about the comic book portrayal of Aurora Monroe, aka Storm?
Oh, it's about as I remember. She's still really like talky and yelly and speaks in poems.
Yes. I really dig the character design. I don't know, like
maybe it's
the flowing outfit? I like the weird flowing cape arms. I don't understand. Like maybe that's a flying squirrel kind of deal. Maybe. Like she could just straight up have a regular cape. You understand? But who thought of that? Like that's just a cool little add-on. The weird headdress thing.
I'm freaked out at the lack of eyeballs sometimes.
Yes. Or the really little eyeballs whenever they're shocked.
Yeah.
Those are drawn very funny.
I do kind of miss the white costume, but I get it.
Lockpicks in the headgear.
That's it. That is clever.
She was like, I always had, like, they took away my headgear, which is full of lockpicks. I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
I had to survive in Africa. I know how to hide things.
Yeah, she ain't playing that. We have Logan, aka Wolverine. This is a little interesting fun fact. Supposedly, by the time we got to this story, editorial was trying to get rid of the Wolverine character because they were like, he's boring. And so, John.
Little did they know.
Yes, artist and co-plotter John Byrne, a Canadian, wanted to stick up for his fellow Canadian character and was all like, whoa, hold on, just give me and Chris some time and we'll make him interesting. Right. Then you fast forward from that to the very iconic at this point panel/page of Wolverine in the sewers, where he's like, oh, you guys tried, now it's my turn.
Right.
And he literally gets an issue to himself where he just takes out
it's
the Hellfire Club.
Wolverine's around us, Logan's around or something.
And so, very, like we literally got to see Wolverine become Wolverine.
Yeah.
The Wolverine, like this is what they go back to every time. This is what the one man war on whatever the heck, just metal and fur and anger
and him
cigars
and him getting a Dirty Harry line.
You caught that too, right? And you go like, I know what you're thinking, bum. You're like 15 meters away, and you're like, I think I could take him out, but you don't know, I'll get you before then, or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I dig it. I totally dig it.
I just think it's funny how much of a jerk he is. He's like, he's already scared, and I can easily finish this but I'm gonna have some fun with
I'm gonna have a conversation, and everyone else has been taken out. I'm gonna have a conversation with this guy. So something that I found interesting is that supposedly right after this story, Cyclops bounces from the group.
Yes.
And then obviously you have the Days of Future Past storyline, which is right after this.
Yeah.
Which uses Kitty Pryde, and we'll talk about her a little bit more in a bit. But that's the shift. When we talk about the shift, that's the shift. Once Cyclops bounces, and eventually he comes back, they slide Logan. You know, they slide that spotlight right on Logan. And it's been there for as long as we can remember.
Logan's been trying to slide into Cyclops' spot in so many different ways.
Yes,
since.
Yes. So how do you, as a Cyclops fan, how do you feel about that? Is it fair to call the parable similar to Batman and Superman? Like one's noticeably cooler, but it's actually the other guy that's working hardest. It's actually the other guy that needs more restraint, that it takes him to be the best version of himself to be that character. Because now that I'm older and I've read enough Superman comics, I'm just like, it's not that easy. Like, the characterization you're trying to give him is not that easy. Do you find that, especially in those early films, they were just trying to write Scott off as, like, what I called him affectionately here on the last week was the Leonardo of the Ninja Turtles. Yeah. You know,
but, you know, Raphael is so much cooler.
Right, but is he though? He's constantly getting his brothers in trouble.
Like, he's an idiot.
And sometimes he likes to wear trench coats and go out and go see movies
but
and stuff.
He's so badass. He's an idiot.
Who did that first? Raphael or the Thing?
What?
The whole trench coat hat. No one can tell. No one can tell I'm 8'6".
I imagine it's the Thing, but I'm not sure.
Write in, guys. Write in. But yeah. So how do you feel about Cyclops and Wolverine's little relationship?
I always feel like, at least in the comic books, it was Wolverine always came up short for Cyclops, despite the fact, huh?
I said didn't.
Yeah, right.
It's 5'3", but
yes, unintended pun points for me. He always came up short when it came to Cyclops for me because, at the end of the day, like Wolverine never had what it took to be a leader.
And that's a very fair thing we should say about Raphael as well. It's like,
he neither one of them had what it takes to be a leader of men. They were force strong and they knew how to do their thing, but when it came to rallying the people and sort of commanding them and keeping everyone in harmony, he's not the guy.
Yeah, he'll probably cut your head off in an argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Logan's the guy on the team you send in for the Black Ops.
This might be a loaded question, but was it Cyclops' propensity to lead that made you a fan of his as a child? Did you find yourself leaning towards the leaders, or was it just the fact that he can blow people out with his eyes?
That also had to do with it.
Big.
That also had to do with it because I was also a young kid with glasses, and it made me feel cool.
Yeah, I dig it. Don't make me take these off.
Right, exactly.
You won't like them when I take it off.
You know what I mean? I had large glasses. It's nerd. I was already a smart kid, so I was like, it made me feel a little better about it. Like him and Geordi from Star Trek, with their cool glasses.
I always gravitated, I think, in that show to Gambit. I guess because he's always trying to bag chicks or something like that. and he also could pass. Like he was always in street clothes, sometimes with a ponytail. Like,
right.
He was always just chilling and always so like what's going on?
He's got these funny bodysuit under it, but he's got a trench coat and
like he'd like flirt with Rogue, and Rogue's like screw off. And he's like, fine, I'll just go have like a crepe somewhere. And
right.
I was always like in a fit of rage, like you killed my father.
Only that time when he had his own episode, and then he kept saying words nobody understood, like the tide.
Yeah, Cajun. He was Cajuned up.
You don't understand the tide. Like, the what?
We hunted our own kind, Logan.
We hunted our own kind.
I just like to slide that in there on occasion.
I didn't remember that line until I heard you guys say it. I was just like, oh wow.
And that's exactly how he says it. We hunted our own kind, Logan. How'd you feel about Hank McCoy, aka Beast, being a member of the Avengers?
I didn't know that happened.
Me either. My boys, he got the upgrade, but I guess he went back.
Yes, he did.
He was like, they're too stuffy there. They keep talking about me leaving my fur everywhere.
By my stars and garters.
I would assume that fur and hair and different colored people in general is more accepted in the X Mansion than it is in the Avengers Mansion. It's
more commonplace.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, Hank. When push comes to shove, Hank definitely comes through for his boys, for his buddies. Because he doesn't have to. He could call the Avengers and,
We could have, just... But the Avengers probably would have went in so aggressive, and I get why that works, too.
Yeah, yeah. I do like what the X-Men have, and especially in this story, that I think is very cool. And we see it sometimes in DC more than Marvel. Mm-hmm. But the idea of legacy, right? Yes. And so while we're dealing with this team, we are getting cameos out the wazoo from OG members. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, Beast pops in, Angel pops in, Banshee at one point just hanging around. And so it's so cool to have these X-Men around. No bad blood. They're just not down.
X-Men alumni.
X-Men alumni. I think that's cool. What do you think about the idea of
It was cool. It's good to know that history never goes away.
It's cool when Dick Grayson references the Teen Titans.
Yeah.
It's I used to do that. I get that. I used to do that. And so it's cool when Angel and Banshee are showing oh, this is the new team? Okay. And then we'll be yeah, get out of my face. And then it becomes a whole thing from there. But Leah, let's talk about Charles Xavier in this, because he is a bundle of just enigma and riddles and all that. Because in previous issues, Charles, Chuck, I think Wolverine used to call him that. Chuck. He forms a psychic bond across the galaxies with Princess Leandra of the Shi'ar Empire, and they both completely believe that this is star-crossed lovers destined to be together forever. So Xavier chucks deuces at his own team of misguided and maligned mutants and just goes to space.
Figure it out. He in the second basement.
He just goes to space. Now, I was doing some research for this episode because I wanted to give you guys the best info I could. And so I went back to the animated series, and instead of hitting the Dark Phoenix episodes, I actually hit the Phoenix episodes.
Okay.
Because they were just called Phoenix Saga and Dark Phoenix Saga, so I hit Phoenix Saga. And there's this entire instance of Charles Xavier getting these mental booty calls from Leandra. And at one point, it manifests an evil Charles, an evil, soul self Charles, who attacks the X-Men for no reason.
I don't remember that.
So, when we start this story, the X-Men are very much working on their own.
Yes.
Cyclops is the unilateral leader. And Charles just shows back up because he finds out that Phoenix Force stuff is going down, and it's a lot more dangerous than he could. He has a real hard time adjusting, and he even tries to give, like I said, Wolverine some demerits, and Wolverine's like, yeah, bub, I'm not going to do that. But the one thing that we know about him, well, besides being a mutant and leading the X-Men, is they're still using Cerebro to locate and recruit mutants to the School of the Gifted Youngsters and stuff. For most of this story, though, Charles is benched. Would you say that? He's Professor X, as we said so passionately in the last episode. Because if he was here, it would solve all the problems. So they literally leave him on a mountain in New Mexico or something like that at one point in time. But how do you feel about Charles in this book? I could go on and say that this is probably the first long-form story arc that I've read where he's not portrayed as the most pristine, highest class member of the team. In this, he very much feels like an old rocker who don't remember the chords anymore, and is seeing a new band up there playing and is not digging it.
It's weird in the sense because as I've gotten older, there were things with Professor X that always come off a little odd to me. On one hand, you are recruiting and finding these young troubled children that are trying to deal with this thing that they don't understand and need help with, how do you say, not controlling, but
management. I think management would be fair, right?
Yeah, management would be fine. These things that they're trying to manage with their lives, whatever these mutations or powers or abilities or differences might be. But then these kids always get caught up in his war.
Yes.
And it's a bit troubling.
Yeah, and it's this idea that this war is ongoing and never ending. Because it's a war of ideology, not a war between actual factual people.
Right.
And so...
Which is there's no side that loses at any point.
you are indeed being brought in, like being brought in and being taken care of, but you're also being groomed, and trained as a member of this war, as a soldier in this war.
Yes,
and especially when it comes to people like Jean, who, if you kind of look back, Charles had some kind of maybe not father-like thoughts of Jean, and it's like, how altruistic is this man, right? Like, how is he just so philanthropic and so helpful and so, like, he just gives and gives and gives.
Whereas, like, on some level, you look at Magneto, and it's like, well, Magneto's at least honest about it.
Yes, yeah. So in this, he was kind of giving your boy some slack, though. He was kind of giving Cyclops some slack. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, he was. I didn't appreciate it at all.
No. It was weird because it did definitely feel like a father-son relationship. Yeah. A strange one, but definitely one. And Scott's always seen Xavier as a father figure. So I guess, what ends up happening in Avengers.
He was the first one too, isn't he?
Which makes the events of Avengers versus X-Men a little bit sadder when you think about that in the scope of things. Yeah, but back to Cerebro. So the story starts off, Cerebro's going crazy. There's 2 mutants they got to get. One's in Chicago, one's in New York. Which one should we start off with first?
Let's start with Chicago.
Chicago. So that introduces us to Kitty Pryde, a.k.a. Shadowcat. It's the first...
Captain Kitty Pryde, by the way.
Is she Captain Kitty Pryde right now?
She was.
She was also leading the X-Men for a bit.
She was leading the Guardians of the Galaxy as well.
Holy hell. And to think that she started in this story.
Yogi's favorite one in the book, I'll have you know.
Kitty Pryde was first introduced in the X-Men titles as a result of an editorial dictate. Because the book was supposed to be depicting a school of mutants and everybody was 20.
Yes.
And so they were like, wait a minute.
There is no children at this school.
Yes, exactly. And so they had to put in a child. And Uncanny X-Men artist John Byrne named Kitty Pryde after a classmate he met in art school.
Yes.
And then he told her, like, I like your name so much, can I use it? And by the way, I'll name my first original character after your name. And boom, we get Kitty Pryde.
And then we immediately make the first questionable decision of having Kitty Pryde be sexually attracted to Colossus, a grown man.
Yeah, so that's another thing. So I remember when I was reading this, I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, that's really cool that they started the Colossus Kitty, because at one point Colossus catches Kitty, and Kitty's like, wow, like, you're so strong or handsome or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh wow, that's a pretty cool little I guess wrinkle, like, that they added that so early. But she's 13 and a half. She's 13 and a half.
Yeah.
And I don't know if well, I guess a crush is a crush, right? I was crushing on people at 13. She's supposed to resemble an adolescent Sigourney Weaver. Really? How do you feel about that?
That's an idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's what she's supposed to. By the way, yeah, I don't know why. She becomes the main character in issues 141 and 142, the Days of Future Past storyline, where she's possessed by her older self, whose consciousness time travels. You guys see in the movie.
You mean it wasn't Logan?
Well, we were just talking about that, right? And that's exactly what we're speaking on. It's like all of a sudden in the movie it becomes Logan, because everything becomes Logan.
Everything Logan.
We did have Ellen Page though, playing Kitty Pryde. I think she was probably 13 in that. She was an X-Men Last Stand.
I think she was older than that.
Well, she better have been, because Bobby Drake was trying to, you know what I'm saying? Whoop, whoop. Our boy Bobby was trying to slip some ice in there, and I don't know if that's how that works.
Bobby, that's not your bag. It's going to take you a little while longer to figure it out.
Oh, yeah, he'll figure it out. He'll figure it out. Yeah. But I feel like in this story she ends up that, like, it goes to great lengths to show that she's a natural hero.
Yes.
Because she helps the X-Men against the Hellfire Club before she even really truly understands what she can do.
Yeah.
She's 13.
She's just kind of getting at everything. It's like, I gotta help.
I think my favorite part is when she becomes sus of Emma. Like, the first time she meets her. She's like, yeah,
I don't like you.
Now, is that lingerie? Like, I don't know, like, did you come to my house? Did you come to my house in lingerie?
You were walking through the suburbs like that.
Yeah. I really, really dig that. And that's the one in Chicago. But the one in New York is Alison Blair, a.k.a. the Dazzler. Dazzler was originally commissioned by Casablanca Records in 1978 as an animated special to be a multimedia cross-promotion with the character known as the Disco Queen. Eventually, they're like, nah, screw it. We're just going to call it the Dazzler. But it was supposed to be a situation in which Marvel Comics had a comic of her. They'd be a film of her. And Casablanca Records would have an artist called Dazzler, who would sing songs. So she would exist in the medium of comics, in the actual real life medium, by producing albums, and then get her own feature film. It's probably one of the most ambitious crossover things in the history of the world.
Ambitious is the word I'm thinking. That's big on. Sure.
Yeah, usually the case is like, we'll make a Kiss comic. They're already singers. Right. We'll make them into a comic.
And then they'll get a movie.
Yeah, and then maybe they get an animated movie somewhere down the line. But for them to be like, all three systems go, let's do this. Big stuff. Big stuff.
None of it worked.
None of it worked. They try to come up with the characters like background and personality and stuff.
Dazzler has a pretty interesting fan base though.
She does. And Dazzler, I also had heard that they originally wanted Grace Jones as the model for Dazzler.
Really?
An African American woman, which is, I mean, that's pretty damn big.
Now it looks like they'll get Lady Gaga. Deal with it.
No, a lot of people were saying stunt casting Taylor Swift for Dazzler.
Oh, y'all have fun with that one.
Which I guess that's a little bit of a vanilla, no pun intended, and definitely no offense comment. That's a little bit of a vanilla choice, but I dig the Dazzler's powers. Like, she can make light photons and stuff like that out of sound, and she kind of has a badass introduction in this story when they go pick her up at the nightclub.
Yeah.
And Jean's like, oh yeah, everyone here is like into drugs and sex. Like, she's like, this club is the worst. Why are we here?
Dazzler just hits on Scott just real hard.
Right off the top. And while the X-Men team decided they're going to split up the team to go get Kitty and go get Dazzler and bring them back to the X-Mansion to find out, what they're up about, see if they can recruit them for the team. But what ends up happening is the entire time the Hellfire Club is watching from afar and pulling the strings. And so they send like these cool they're not even robots, they're people in mechanical suits.
Yeah,
right?
it's weird.
And all of the suits are created to neutralize the powers of the X-Men. Mm-hmm. And so they handily, almost on both sides, take them down. The only reason why they can't take them down in New York is because Phoenix decides that she's not having any of it. And I like this thing where it goes like, Jean just materialized our clothes on.
Yeah.
I should be afraid, but no time to worry about that now. And I'm like, yeah, you should probably be like, what's going on here with that?
I'm concerned, buddy.
Yeah, I really, I dig the little red flags of Jean Grey. And it starts with stuff like that. Like, oh, she just changed her clothes. I guess there's nothing to worry about.
That's not a weird power at all.
She just stopped my beams from my eyes. Oh, that's nothing to worry about.
Oh, my God.
But anyway, they're able to do battle with these robots, and they're like, screw it, we gotta go find out what's going on in Chicago, because if they came for us, they probably came for the rest of us. And Alison Blair is all like, nah, I'm good. Y'all could keep that X-Men thing. I got gigs and stuff to deal with. So Dazzler wants no part of it. Meanwhile, in Chicago, everyone's captured but Kitty.
Yes.
And Kitty does her best to free everybody, but this Hellfire Club is literally the thing over everybody's heads. So let's get a little bit into the Hellfire Club. Created by the Uncanny X-Men writer and duo, which I'm thinking about doing that one of these days, like the best artist duos, like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Claremont and Byrne. I had another one right on the tip of my tongue.
I'm kind of a fan of the what I want to say, Bendis and Malieve stuff.
Okay, and I'm a bit of a newbie, but I dig Snyder and Capullo. Like, that's my little groove there. But yeah, they were
Gleason and Tomasi's, I think, is probably my
good stuff.
Yeah.
Those guys, good stuff.
Yeah.
When creating the Hellfire Club, John Byrne and Chris Claremont were heavily influenced by a 1966 episode of the British television series The Avengers. No relation. In that episode, the Hellfire Club I mean, in general, the Hellfire Club often comes into confrontation with the mutant superhero team, the X-Men. And although the club appears to merely be a social club for wealthy elites, its inner circle seeks to influence world events, and it's one of the many shadow organizations in comic books.
Yeah.
Comic book lore. But what's actually cool is that that term Hellfire Club is also the name of several exclusive clubs for high society established in Britain and Ireland in the 18th century. This is a real thing.
Yeah.
The Hellfire Club. Such clubs were rumored to be the. I should do this in a more refined accent. Such clubs were rumored to be the meeting places of persons of quality who wished to take part in socially perceived immoral acts, and the members were often involved in politics. Neither the activities nor membership of the club are easy to ascertain. The clubs were rumored to have distant ties to an elite society known only as the Order of the Second Circle. So, like, this is real urban legend kind of stuff that they're dealing with here with the Hellfire Club.
Almost Masons or Illuminatus.
And even if you've never read this story in particular, if you're a fan of the movies, you've already been introduced to the Hellfire Club.
Yes.
Because we met the Hellfire Club first in cinematic form in X-Men First Class. Mm-hmm. I think the only two members of that are in this are Emma Frost and Sam Shaw. Yes. I keep calling him Sam. His name's Sebastian. His name's Sebastian. Sebastian Shaw. Yeah. And so, yeah, we have Sebastian Shaw. He can absorb various types of pure energy to further enhance his physical attributes.
Wunderbar.
And he killed Darwin in the First Class, the man who can adapt to anything. Sit on that. John Byrne based the appearance of Sebastian Shaw on British actor Robert Shaw, and he debuted in the issue that we've read.
Yes.
Which was also kind of cool because although they've been pulling the strings, again, Claremont's been breadcrumbing this story pretty much 30 issues ago.
Yeah.
Half a year. And so we're getting a little bit of those dots and of those, dotting the T's and the crossing of the I's when it comes to the Hellfire Club. And the member, I guess, that we've met the most up until this point is Jason Wingard, a.k.a. Mastermind. He was a probationary member of the Hellfire Club, given that he could coerce Jean Grey.
Yes.
They're all like, you want to be part of this super secret society? We're down.
You have to do the ultimate thing of things.
Yes, but you need to... what can you do, basically, for us? And he's like, well, I can bring you the strongest X-Men, and I can put her on our side.
Yes.
And so what I like about this story is that all the time, the entire time, mostly Shaw, is like, so, about that...
How's that plan?
Yeah, about that thing that you were talking about doing. About that thing you said you were going to handle. Have you handled that thing, huh? Is that thing handled yet?
A year ago.
Yeah, and so... but Wingard got it.
Yes.
When we start to read, Jason Wingard, a.k.a. Mastermind, is able to create these time slips that send Jean Grey's mind back in time into the 1800s, where she embodies... I guess her ancestor, Lady Jean Grey,
and it's also able to over the course of a year, influence Jean Grey under the guise of other people.
Yes.
He is a priest who listens to her problems and allows her to vent. He is a lovely, handsome, pretty beach boy who is able to how do you say? Heal her of whatever.
Whatever
of her ails and aches and issues.
Yeah, that's another thing. Prior to this story, Jason Wingard had been affecting all kinds of aspects of Jean Grey's life. And at one point, when Jean Grey thought the X-Men to be dead and decides that she just wants to go out and live her normal life, she goes into, like, I think, like a town or whatever. Like, she just goes to vacation. And I think everyone in the town is Jason Wingard. Like, everyone is there manipulating her. So her mind, her thoughts haven't been herself. Her body hasn't been her own.
Nope.
For about a year up until this point. And now, the Hellfire Club seems to really be reigning in with these androids that were able to attack the X-Men that were split between New York and Chicago, and now getting closer to Jean Grey. And Jean Grey's having romantic thoughts of Jason Wingard. Yep. Doesn't understand why. Totally down to make out with him wherever he manifests them. And yeah, she has absolutely no problem with it. So I thought that was incredibly sick. That's incredibly depraved.
It's highly rapey.
How do you feel about the lengths that Jason Wingard went to become a member of the Hellfire Club?
That sounds about right. Like it's some of those high level guys will do a lot of things to become, esteemed members of these secret social clubs where all the pie is free and everyone has
free
the
pie
money.
for everyone. If this story was written today, do you think it'd be a clearer line to the illusion of rape?
A clearer line.
Do you think? Or do you feel that the line is pretty clear here?
I feel like the line's pretty clear here.
Okay, I dig that. Because that's ultimately what this man is doing.
Yeah. No, 100%. No, I think they would have blurred it further or have just like not done that.
Right. So yeah, Wingard's a creep. He's a sick bastard.
Total creep.
We have Harry Leland, who's able to increase mass and debuted in Uncanny X-Men 132, 2 issues after basically the rest of everybody else. That's all I got on him. That's all I got on old Leland.
I think that's all anyone's got.
I do like when he makes Wolverine go through the floor.
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the Scarlet Witch moment.
Oh my God, that's exactly what that is. Wow, I'm going to look at that moment way differently now. Awesome. One of my favorite members of the Hellfire Club, Emma Frost. The White Queen.
Who has not nearly come into the potential of her utter horribleness.
Yeah. High-level telepathic abilities. She can read minds, implant mental suggestions, wipe memories, capable of shape-shifting into an organic diamond form that can still be choked if you watch First Class.
Yes.
Cracked. Crack those diamonds. But she cannot use her psychic powers when she's in the diamond form.
Right.
And like I said, she made her debut in 129, which is where the story begins. What breaks my heart about the Emma Frost situation is eventually she becomes not only a hero, but the leader of the X-Men at one point, or at least the leader of that school, betrothed with Cyclops.
Yes.
And all that. But when you think that her origin started with her manipulating the first love of Cyclops, like that's the first time you meet her, she's actively helping her friend do disgusting things to who will eventually be the love of her life's girlfriend.
Yes, and still doing very weird things when with Scott.
Yes, yeah, and so
and all the moments where she just like shapeshifts into Jean, and it's just like,
is this
no,
better?
You need to stop.
Yeah, please stop.
This is weird in every way. I think maybe Scott just has a thing for telepaths. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where he's like, I never have to explain myself. Can you just look in my mind? Just look in my mind. You know what I want to eat? Just look. Stop making this an argument.
Just order it. Oh, it's here? Yeah.
That's it. Could you imagine that kind of relationship? That's the biggest problem in most relationships. So you can handle that. Everything else is good. Last but not least is Donald Pierce, right out of Logan. He is the Kentucky Fried Southern gentleman that we see in Logan. That's like my favorite line. My favorite line. The Wolverine as I live and breathe. And it's my favorite line because I feel like besides comics, you can never say that line as that way.
I really like the moment where he sees little Laura Kinney coming out the building and he goes through all 3 emotions of the word like, no.
Now, Laura,
like,
no.
No? And he's like, I gotta toughen up. No.
Same thing happens here. He gets his arm cut off.
Yeah.
And just to show that he's a cyborg because of all the expositionary dialogue. It's like, I cut his arm, but it's still here. There's circuits in it. He must be a robot. Don't you know? I am a robot. Then that is my arm that you cut off.
Thank you for explaining that to us.
It helps, but you know what? Another thing is a lot of this stuff was written for all ages.
Yes.
That's hard to believe, though, reading this particular story, right?
Yeah. Right.
I feel like there's things people won't be able to grasp reading this particular story if you're of all ages, especially like a child. Like, I don't know if I can give this subject matter to, like, my 9-year-old niece. No, I don't know if she would understand the depths of where
I don't think a child understands what's being said when, Wingard is talking about being a man that approached bikini-clad Jean Grey on a beach somewhere on holiday.
Oh my God! All that stuff is so sickening.
Subtext is kind of getting lost in there.
All that stuff is so sickening. Eventually, they decide that they're gonna crash into the they're gonna crash basically the Hellfire Club's party. Jean Grey and Scott. And they're gonna. I think of Aurora. Some of them. They're about to all go through, but eventually another time slip happens, and she just starts making out with Jason Wingard again, and then Scott's like, that was probably one of my favorite expositional things because Scott goes like, "I'm very mad that this is happening, but I could just be jealous." Like he's like, this is very weird. This random man is just making out with the girl that I love, and I'm extremely suspicious that there could be something wrong happening here, or maybe I'm just jealous, or maybe I'm just.
What are the answers?
Yeah, maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe I'm just jealous, and in just out of the same way you saw it in Thriller. Where Michael Jackson is walking up the stairs and he turns around and you see that face. Wingard does the same thing, turns around, and Scott's like, "That's Mastermind." Oh hell no! Goes to attack him and is hit by a wave of force. When he turns around, Dominatrix Jean is there, the Black Queen.
Yes.
In an outfit. How would you describe that outfit? GT.
I would probably describe it as Mistress Chic.
Yeah, Mistress Chic. That's a very unique take there.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely. She's in like just like hosiery and lingerie.
Yeah.
A cape still.
Lots of like leather and belt and buckles. Leather and buckles.
Her hair's all done up. She even has like a fancy mole that seems
Yeah.
like those posh people would have at those times. And she honestly believes that she is now the Black Queen. This was the entire plan. Wingard was going to bring her into the fold. He would become a member. She'd become the Black Queen. And it's also realized that Wingard wasn't cool enough to do this by himself.
Yeah.
He had Emma kind of extend the reach of his illusions.
Like a battery.
Yeah, to get to this point. And we've already been talking about the fact that Charles Xavier, from a young age, put mental blocks in her mind, right?
Yes.
So you have that. And then Wingard is all up in there too. All his fingers are all up in there. And everything seems to be going right. They end up capturing all the X-Men. They send Wolverine to the sewers. Yes. Like, he's dead. Don't worry about him. They said they basically take out everybody else. I think Nightcrawler, they were like, this gun will just confuse you long enough so you can't use your powers. Right. Zap, and he's like, I'm confused long enough that I can't use my powers.
Yes, Psyduck has used confusion. It was super effective.
It was super effective. And so all the X-Men are captured. They have like these inhibitor collars. Yes. Yeah. Except for Cyclops. I mean, Cyclops has the inhibitor collar, but they also have a big old ruby quartz helmet on. Like a Jason Todd-esque,
yeah, kind of Red Hoodish.
So he can't use his optic blast and stuff. And everything seems to be going fine. Prior to this, the X-Men had rendezvous because Cyclops was already, like I said, King Leader was like, nah, somebody's doing this to us. So we're not going back home because somebody might be touching all our stuff. They know where we've been. This is not cool. We're going to go to see Angel. So they go see Angel for a little bit prior to getting locked up by the Hellfire Club. Yeah. And in seeing Angel, he's like, yo, I think this is the Hellfire Club. And Angel's like, I'm in the Hellfire Club. What you talking about? I've been in the... Come on. They
just wish white folk.
Yeah, he's like, they ain't nothing to worry about. And Jean Grey shows up. It's like, take a hike, Angel. And they make love like on across the vistas of New Mexico. Yes. Prior to that, though, we get a moment straight out of Last Stand where she she takes off the glasses, the visor in the comics, the glasses in the movie of Scott, and Scott's terrified that he's gonna kill her. Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I can hold it back," and she does. Yes. I was completely terrified when she did that in the film. I felt like in the comic, my eyebrow was raised like, that's not all that cool. Like, you're doing, like, if you can do that, you can do anything kind of stuff. But there was a level of romance there that I don't feel like was depicted in the film.
And then they make the creepiest decision I think a couple can possibly make, which is like, I'd like to establish a psychic rapport between me and you. Yes. So that you can always hear what I'm thinking and I can always hear what you're thinking. And I was just like, no. Run.
Have you ever seen that Black Mirror episode?
No, I haven't.
There's a Black Mirror episode where this couple who has a child, the mother has an accident, she ends up becoming brain dead. And they're able to put her consciousness inside the man's head, and he can see through her eyes. She can see through his eyes, and they can raise the child together now. But she can see everything. When he goes to the bathroom, when he checks out a girl in the elevator, all of that. And I don't know if Scott's ready for that. Now listen, he did have cosmic sex on top of a mountain. You know? So maybe when all that happens and a girl goes, you know, do you want to do this? You're kind of like, yeah, I guess, you know, I'm totally down. The reason why I bring all this up is Cyclops like, you know what? Maybe I can use this mental link to free Jean. That would be awesome. Let me try. So he uses the mental link, is able to get inside of Jean Grey's mind, where he finds Jason Wingard. Yes. Cyclops becomes some sort of weird pilgrim person. Do you want to comment on Storm being a slave? Randomly?
Okay, yeah. So part of them being from what, the 1800s or whatever.
Yeah, she views Jason Wingard has effectively made the illusion that everything that's going on right now is in the 1800s.
Which means they are all enemies of the state, and that Storm is a slave woman. Yes. A rogue slave woman looking to take down, I don't know, the proletariat or something.
But they make it a point to identify her as a slave.
Yeah, they do. And I was just like,
the other ones are like, and the rest. They're like the slave and the rest. And I was like, oh, that's a lot there.
You need to make it clear.
Yeah.
Storm is the slave.
Y'all understand that?
You get it? Yeah.
So Jason Wingard and Cyclops do battle in the mind of Jean Grey.
We need to have Storm call someone Mammy.
Yes. Oh my God. And Cyclops is stabbed. And in being stabbed,
they are having a sword fight on the astral plane of Jean's mind.
In Jean's mind. And when he is stabbed, we get the fakest cliffhanger in probably this entire series, where he's stabbed in the mind, and therefore he collapses in real life.
Yes.
And Nightcrawler exclaims, "He's not moving. I think he's dead. I'm pretty sure he's dead." And then everyone's like, "Oh no!" And then the first page of the next issue, he's like, "Oh look, he's getting up." And I was like, "What the hell was the point of that suspense?" And I'm guessing if you had to wait a week or 2 weeks, that does a lot. But come on, like that.
Is that what the circulation was?
I think it was bi-weekly, bi-monthly. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I felt like that was a bit hokey there.
No, yeah, and it reads so much differently in a trade, but like,
yeah,
when you imagine like, oh, this is the end of this,
because it was definitive. It's like he is dead. There's like exclamation points. He's the only one on the floor. Everyone's like, "What's going on?"
Oh
he's
no!
Dead. Yeah,
he died in the game, and he died for real.
Yeah, that's died in the game, died in real life. But then Cyclops just gets up, and so Shaw's like, "Okay, well, now that all that's dealt with, we can finally
severed the psychic link between you and your love."
Yeah, he's like, now we can just destroy them.
Yes.
So, honey, destroy these X-Men. And she's all like, "Fools!
Fools!
You did the one thing. Yeah, you did the one thing that you didn't have to do, which was
that's my
hurt
favorite
the love
exclamation.
Of my life.
Fools!
Fools! She was like, there's a lot of her just putting her hands up in power, and she was like, you thought you could control me, and 2, you've been doing this for this long. 3, you killed my boy toy. Like, all of this is it's about to go down. It's going down now." While she says this, she frees Cyclops mentally.
Yes.
And then is able to direct him with the psychic rapport, because he can't see. He doesn't have his visors.
Yeah.
So, in a scene almost like The Last Stand, she's pointing him. Not Last Stand, Apocalypse. She's pointing him at the targets. He's knocking down Leland. He's blowing up all kinds of holes into the walls and stuff.
Cyclops is essentially using the Force involuntarily.
Yes. And we get to what I think is probably one of my favorite parts in this entire story, which is the part where Jean Grey corners Mastermind.
Yes.
So while everyone else is dealing with the Hellfire Club, and Mastermind is actually mindedly casting an illusion that the X-Men are attacking the club.
Mm-hmm.
he runs away. He runs to like the roof, and she follows him the entire time, narrating like, "You dirty son of, you tried to, you went into my mind when I was vulnerable, the weakest parts. You made me love you. You made me trust you. All to my hand." She's like, "You want power? You wanted me because you wanted power. You want power? I'll show you power." And she basically opens up his mind to the ideas of eternity,
the powers of she releases she releases the key to cosmic awareness,
which is like the concepts of eternity, and just out of your mind bonkers awareness of everything going on, and he basically becomes like a vegetable.
Yeah.
She also is like, "You're an ugly man, portray the man that you are," and she takes away the illusion that he was anything other than the mastermind. But the way they drew Jean in that, her face is almost all shadow.
Yeah.
In that she is relishing in revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so digging doing this. And we've seen at various points how the Phoenix as an entity responds to these raw
emotions.
Yeah, right? These raw stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
Like love or love making.
Lust.
Yeah. Revenge, vengeance, envy, all those kind of things. And
massive forms of violence.
Do
you not know how much Dario Cueto loves violence?
Oh yeah, I miss Dario Cueto. So the Hellfire Cloud's basically gone. They're like, okay, we gotta bounce.
Right.
Don't worry, I keep a spare jet in the ocean, or in like the Central Park or whatever. Don't worry.
It's down there where the Golden Eye is in that movie.
Yeah. See, so he's like, don't worry about it. Scott's like, don't worry about it. I'm calling the jet. We're out of here. He calls the jet. They all get on it, and it's at this point in time that Jean Grey decides to expound on her thing. She's like, by the way, I am now the Dark Phoenix. Fools! You let the biggest threat onto this ship. And everyone was like, what? And she just blows up the jet. She just blows up the jet. And so
it's like a child that is waiting for the perfect moment to scare you.
Yeah.
It's like, fantastic, we're going home. Ha ha!
They got everybody on the plane. Everybody was good. Everybody was fine. They opened the shut case. We done beat everybody. We're good here. Nope. Cause, by the way, I'm Dark Phoenix now. That's what you're gonna call me, and that's where I'm gonna be. And Dark Phoenix basically gets into a whole scuffle with the X-Men. Hank, in like kinda, in a feudal fashion, makes some sort of like headband that's supposed to like dampen her powers.
Yes, a power dampener of some sort. It's like, quickly! Destroy her while we still can.
I love that Nightcrawler's the one that gets to put it on. He's like, ha! Gotcha! Lip shot.
Bam!
Yeah. He's like, but she overpowers the the old headband. Mm-hmm. Literally, like, just wipes the floor.
Yes.
With all of the X-Men.
As we read 30 pages of everyone going, I have to hurt this woman. I don't want to.
She's so powerful.
But she's our friend.
You do get an instance of Wolverine getting close enough to stab her.
Yes.
And she actually reverts back to her regular Jean self, very much like Last Stand, and is like, do it. And he's like, I love you. And
except this time he completely...
Yeah, he does not do it, and then he gets blasted off to the side. At one point, she literally, and this is probably the most frightening, she just takes the steel away from Colossus.
Yeah.
She's all like, no, you're human. And by the way, remember that tree you're holding? Now it's solid gold.
Ah!
And it just falls on Colossus, and he can't do nothing about it. Beast has to try to help him get up, and everyone's just dealing with it. Everyone's knocked out. She at one point, she just blasts everyone. Everyone's down, and then Cyclops.
Yep.
The OG, he walks up, and he's like, this is not what life is about. Like, his life is about love.
I do love how, like, love. Again, she's having this over-the-top, almost super poetic, not quite Shakespearean, but, like, big theater sort of, like, writing.
Yeah.
And it's like, Jean, we need to talk. I won't listen.
Yes.
Oh.
So should I stop?
Okay, that was to the point. I guess I'm just going to continue.
ultimately, very much like how you got that moment of defiance of Captain America standing up to Thanos and the horde of his army.
Yes.
Here's this incredibly cosmic force, like more power than any human should ever wield. And Cyclops, doesn't see it that way. That's the love of his life.
Yes.
That's all he sees. That's Jean Grey, and she needs help. And so he walks up and is like, you don't want to do this.
He's banking on the idea that if she was out to kill them, they'd have been dead already.
Yes. And she even goes so far as to say that she didn't want to attack the X-Men, but they will be her last link to humanity. Like, if she can extinguish them, then she can go and do whatever the heck she wants.
Right.
And so she's like, oh, that's actually what happens. She's like, she knocks them all down, and then she just goes to feast on a sun.
Yeah.
She opens up a Stargate, feasts on a sun, and that sun then explodes and kills billions of people.
Yes.
Or
an
8
entire
billion people.
star system dies.
Yeah, just goes, gone. You see, there's a frightening drawn picture. You understand? Like, this is something that was thought of people seeing their sun explode they're on their planet,
playing with their kids, holding with their families,
and they're like, and as some of them have no idea what's going on, and the ones that do know that time is up or something like that. I'm like, this is so dark. But Jean doesn't stop by there. She just goes back home.
Yep.
She goes back to talk to her mama and her papa, and they're like, "You're no daughter of ours." So she flips out again, and that's when Scott stopped.
Fools!
Yes, exactly. That's when Scott's able to stop her, and she's like, "Okay," and she the Phoenix Force is able to put to rest a bit, and all seems well. She didn't kill any humans.
Right.
No humans are dead.
This long story is over.
And this is all done. And happily ever. Nope. Because they disappear. Everyone just disappears. The entire X-Men just disappear. Jean Grey's parents are like, what the hell's going on? Oh, yeah, and I forgot that while Scott was trying to talk some sense into her, Xavier basically sucker punched her.
Yes.
He shows up and he's like, my time to shine.
Because Xavier's a cheap fighter.
And he probably took forever to get there because he wasn't there. He had to get there. And he got there. He's like, wait, can I still do something? Mind punch. And so he knocks her out. But yeah, we find out that the Shi'ar and Professor X's boo, Princess Leandra,
have transported them to their ship.
Yeah, because there needs to be a price to be paid. Now, I'm going to go from there to a little bit of an editorial note. Rumor has it that the way they wanted to get this done was that the Shi'ar were going to depower Jean.
Yes.
And then they were going to send Jean back to the X-Men.
Okay.
And they were going to wipe their hands of it, and all's fine.
That would have been nice and clean.
And so they wrote it, and that's the way it was going to go. Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief, he was down with it. All there. That was how it was going to end in the last issue, which would have been what? Issue... I don't know where that paper is at. 38? 138?
Probably.
Yes. Issue 138. That's how that was going to end.
Okay.
But my man Jim Shooter was looking through issue 136, and he's like, what's this? And they're like, what's what? Over here, she ate a star, and she killed 1 billion people. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, if she killed 1 billion people, we can't just take her powers and send her back.
Yeah.
There needs to be...
She must pay for what she did. There must be recompense.
There needs to be repercussions to this. How do you feel about that decision? Do you think that Jean Grey could have been let go? Do you think the court could have found her insane?
I think that would have been I do think that would have been a little too clean. It's a weird thing about, dirty hands. It's like, yeah, it wasn't really Bucky, but it was Bucky.
And also this idea of revenge, like this idea of accountability, like someone has to go down for this.
Yeah.
People died, people lost loved ones. Life is extinguished. It can't just be as simple as I'm sorry.
And we can't exactly punish a cosmic entity.
Right. And so they decide that they're all going to die, basically. Oh, I think they're going to kill Jean. And then
Jean has been sentenced to death until Professor X incurs the greatest backdoor trick known to modern societies.
Yes.
Trial by combat.
Which, I don't know. This is probably like a Star Trek thing, right?
It's a lot of things.
I feel like it's happened way more since then.
Maybe.
This whole, like, Oh, we're gonna die. Trial by combat. Damn it! How did he know we can never refuse a trial by combat?
Fools!
Right, exactly. And so they decided they're gonna fight them on the blue side of the moon.
Yes, something undiscovered by the Earth peoples.
And they're gonna go ahead and do battle, and they kind of get walloped. But then it comes down to Jean Grey and Jean Grey as Marvel Girl.
Yes.
And Cyclops trying to tackle the last leg of this, and they basically knock Cyclops out unconscious. She flips on again. The psychic barriers break again, and she becomes the Phoenix and starts to cause tremendous damage. And push comes to shove, and they have to decide what's going to happen. And eventually Phoenix, Jean Grey's psyche, she has enough control at this point to realize
she's turning back and losing control of her self.
Yes. And so she agrees to sacrifice herself in a ball of fire so that the rest of them can live. And that's basically what ends up happening. And that's probably also the most known part of this story, right?
Yeah.
Is the idea that Jean doesn't live through it.
No.
She becomes a sun in the
I just love how the Shi'ar are just like, well, time to go.
Yeah, what we wanted her dead. And she
That's
died.
what we wanted.
She wanted her dead, and she
Not
died.
exactly how we expected it, but
Any of you guys want water? No.
Yeah.
Any of you guys want something to drink? No.
We got hot dogs.
All right, it's gonna be a long trip back to Earth.
Okay.
And so
Here's the shuttle.
And so this changes so much of the dichotomy. Like I said, Cyclops eventually bounces because he's not down with any of this. Kitty Pryde gets a more of extended role on the team. Wolverine definitely gets more of an extended role on the team. Storm also gets to head the team for a bit of time. So they make definitive changes to this team, and this story definitely changed comic books. It became the de facto story of absolute power corrupts absolutely. But some people see it as having all kinds of different. Any art, right? Any piece of art is interpreted in all kinds of different ways, depending on where you're at in your life when you see it.
All of the meta text.
Exactly. And so let's get into the idea of Phoenix as a metaphor, right? Because in Greek mythology, a phoenix, as you know, is a long-lived bird that cyclically regenerates or is otherwise reborn or born again. Associated with the sun, a phoenix obtains new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. According to some sources, the phoenix dies in a show of flames and combustion, very much like in the last issue of the Phoenix Saga. Although there are some sources that claim that the legendary bird dies and simply decomposes. That's not as cute. Before being born again. And so that, with the idea that that's what Jean was in this story. She rose to her greatest potential, her greatest power, and then eventually combusted.
Yes.
Very much like the Phoenix. Others have seen some feminist lines in this. Now
that's always popular.
Yes. So so I can definitely see some. I'm not gonna see where there obviously isn't. But I do see a running through line of men trying to tell Jean what to do.
Yes. Or trying to control her.
Right. And tell her, like, you don't worry about that. Like, we got that. Or, don't mess your pretty little head up about this. And so...
Or you're like, oh, no. This is who you really are. You are with us.
And so, not to dampen one to light up the other, it's very much like some of the narrative that they try to put in Captain Marvel.
Yes.
Right? Of like, you're too hysterical, you don't know your true power, we're going to tell you what your true power is, and you just got to listen to us and stay at that level. Don't get any higher. And it's this metaphor that if a woman ever finds out what her true power is, she will realize that she is powerful. Right? She will realize that she is more powerful than she could imagine. Women are more powerful than they can imagine. And I like that a bit, but where the metaphor falls flat is that feminism becomes all encompassing, all, you understand what I'm saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that women will eventually just burn out.
Realizing your feminist power will lead you to destroy billions of people, and also
so you better off just killing yourself, because realizing your true potential will do that to you.
Lead to the downfall of civilizations.
Yeah, I don't think that, but I do like the idea of identity, because I think that, like you said, Jean Grey as an identity is incredibly skewed.
Yes.
Where she goes hand in hand with this Phoenix entity. And although initially they just wanted it to be something that possessed her, if she eventually became a part of her. And at a young age, it's something that Professor Xavier locked away. And so I feel like one of the lessons we learn in this is that you don't really have to like every aspect of your life, but you should at least go to lengths to understand it. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a problem with your father, you may not like to sit there and dwell on it, but you might want to understand it, because if not, life or your enemies possibly can use it against you because you don't understand it. And so Jean never understood this other side of herself. And instead of just giving her the power and the authority to get that understanding, they just kept it from her. And so the 1 second that she got exposed to it through Wingard, she was seduced with all this kind of craziness. How do you feel about Jean Grey digging the evil side, digging some of that excess?
I think a lot of people, and I won't even call it I won't even call it an evil side, but I will call it like
indulgent,
a primal indulgence.
Okay.
In which sense that there is an attraction to being able to like extract revenge or assert a form of dominance where you did not have such.
Yes.
Just things that you can. You probably realize you take a little bit of joy in, but you don't want to because like that's a certain thing you should be above.
Right.
You know.
I also feel like as a force, right? Like it's supposed to be the combined consciousness of all time or something, right?
Yeah.
I feel like as a force, it probably isn't that emotional. It probably is very pragmatic in its thinking.
No. The cartoon makes no bones about that. Whereas like it makes it very clear like, encompassing Jean introduced me things I had never understood before, like emotions.
Yes, and it literally becomes a junkie off of these emotions.
Yes.
And that leads down a path, and maybe that's a little bit of that feminism thing too, right? This idea that like, the women are full of emotion, and if too much emotion, like
maybe.
But
it's also just an entity of the universe coming to terms with things it never experienced. Just like, you mean I can want?
And I also think it's trying to say that the true depths of humanity are the depths of those emotions.
Yes.
To be truly human, you have to really know how to suffer, be inspired, fall in love, those things, and it really just got a high off of those things that it never did before.
I often consider the difference between the man and the animal is, a level of passion.
Yes. Yes.
An animal does,
which makes sense why Wolverine was always up in that Kool-Aid, huh?
What an animal does, it does because it has to. It's not exactly out there, roaming through the sea or through the sand for for fun.
Yeah. And it's different when you're doing that for survival.
Yes.
Or you're thinking your one-track mind, I need to survive,
Yeah.
This is like, I get to have fun?
Right.
Fun is a concept I've never realized before. And speaking of concepts, how do you feel about this being like a parable to a coming-of-age story? The idea, like, you don't realize the powers you have until you do, and kind of the first time that you do, you kind of become a junkie for them. Like, you're like, I'm 20, so, I can have ice cream for breakfast. I'm going to have ice cream for breakfast every day this week. And then someone got to put you down because the dark forces of the Phoenix Force have taken over your body.
The Briar's Force.
Yes,
taken over.
Yes. The Ben and Jerry's Force.
I mean, I guess, but like that seems weird because it just kind of concludes with
death,
you destroying yourself in a blaze of not glory.
But I guess it's a choice of choosing not to be led by your emotions. I guess, or be a slave to your whims. I guess there's something poetic in there somewhere. And it must have been something poetic in there because they've done this story to freaking death, GT, and so. In hindsight,
X-Men the animated series, X-Men the Evolution, X-Men 3 The Last Stand, and now
the Dark Phoenix.
Yes.
The first X-Men movie without the X-Men in the title.
I don't think we've ever gotten a light Phoenix. We've just gotten Dark Phoenix.
No. We now got just Phoenix. I don't even think they mentioned Phoenix in Apocalypse. No. So it's like
it's just Jean Grey and oh crap, Tooth Phoenix.
So with Last Stand being the longest adaptation of this story. Was there anything that was there any through lines you can see between this and Last Stand? Things that you liked, things that you think that Last Stand got right, or balls that you felt like they completely dropped?
Probably everything having to do with Jean Grey and the team.
That's true. She didn't feel like a member when she came back.
I mean, maybe not, but it's also just like everything that happens after she is dealing with the power of the Phoenix is basically just like she's so separated from everyone on the team except Logan.
Yes.
Who is a dude who's barely part of the team and is totally got the hots for her despite her being, with Scott.
Yeah, and people like...
It was weird.
You would assume people like Beast and Storm would have known Jean for years.
Right.
Up until this point. They would be heartbroken. They should be able to tell you stories of like, yeah, when we first got here. But none of that.
No, it's like everyone's just like a mission at that point.
Yes.
Because she is sort of the weapon of Magneto.
Yeah.
Which is almost impressive for them in the sense that, like, we've spent 3 movies really just fighting Magneto over and over again.
Having been introduced to the Hellfire Club, do you think they could have done something with those guys and that story? And this story, I'm sorry?
Interestingly enough, the guy who either wrote and or directed this upcoming Dark Phoenix film says he wanted to put the Hellfire Club in it, but had he done so, it'd have been like a 4-hour movie. Okay.
Yeah. Shaw's dead.
It's handily. A pretty dense story.
Yeah. Shaw's pretty handily dead. But I also do know that Matthew Vaughn, who ended up, directing First Class, was working on Last Stand.
Yeah.
So maybe he was trying to do some kind of thing. I don't know, but it seems so weird that they have the Hellfire Club, who's so instrumental in this story, but they don't have them in either Dark Phoenix story.
Even though they did use 2 of them at some point.
Yes.
I think if you tried to include the whole thing, it would end up being 2 films.
So I guess this is the golden question then, GT, because you seem like to be going around it. So let's beat that bush to the ground. Can this be adapted?
There's a lot of fat cutting to do. I think it can, but the problem with it every time is that we never ever really have a good Jean Grey before we get there.
I agree in the same sense of it's like how we got the air sucked out of us when Superman died in BVS. We hadn't had Superman for long enough.
Right.
So that when he dies, there is no loss. Whereas, spoiler alert, when a certain big member of Avengers dies in the last Avengers film,
right,
everyone feels it because we spent a decade with some of these characters.
Right.
They gave us 1 movie with Superman before they killed him. They gave us 2 with Jean, but she really didn't do anything. And we thought she died in the last one. We thought she died in part 2.
And we've only gotten 1 with, Sansa Jean.
Yes. Yes. And in that movie, she shows the Phoenix Force. She has the Phoenix Force already. So
and like, is she even in Apocalypse all that much?
Right.
Like, is she in the background of it?
Unleash your power, Jean. That's basically the third act. The third act is them all losing.
Right.
Xavier's inside Apocalypse's mind, and they're mind fighting, as you do.
Like, this is the 3rd movie in their timeline, and we've just gotten Jean Grey.
Right.
And she's still not the main character, or even, it's seemingly not a big character, because this is still all about the main team, Magneto and Charles dealing with Apocalypse.
Right.
But in the background, we're trying to do this Jean Grey thing.
Not only Jean Grey thing, they brought in Cyclops. We got a brand new Cyclops.
Yes, we did.
Who don't really get much to do because they have to juggle.
I don't even know who Cyclops is, honestly.
They have to juggle, Magneto's plotline and Xavier's plotline and McTaggart's plotline and Apocalypse's plotline.
And Mystique's plotline.
And let's throw Wolverine in there. You guys got any room for Wolverine? Of course we do.
Yeah, of course.
They just throw Wolverine and the Weapon X montage in there somehow.
Of course.
It's ridiculous. Juggernaut's ridiculous. But
and until we get a level of time where we can actually have a Jean Grey character that we can appreciate, the fall into being the Dark Phoenix is always really shallow.
Yeah.
And it becomes so different from the story every time almost. It's just like, oh, the Dark Phoenix is just this villain that we fight. Like, it's their half-baked version of Thanos as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. This story and Days of Future Past also are considered the definitive X-Men stories, which kind of sort of makes me sad. Because it's been about 30 damn years.
It's also weird because those 2 stories need a lot of backstory to really understand.
And they're both depressing as hell.
Yeah.
So like, where's the rest of it? Where there? I mean, Yogi has pointed me in directions of great X-Men stories, and I've read certain X-Men stories that I really dig. But I just, with them going to this well again, it just makes me scratch my head and go, what? How much more can they fish from here?
It's the only big money story that people generally know when it comes to the X-Men.
That sucks.
I truly believe it is. Like, they understand Days of Future Past to a degree, but Days of Future Past is really the means to an end when it comes to the X-Men timeline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got an understanding of Magneto as far as him being a terrorist who's, you know, like he's a terrorist who is burdened by his memories of his own terrorism.
Yeah. And on occasion has to do his own act of terrorism.
Right.
For his own people. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
They understand Magneto in that sense because it's a very human story and it's easy to adapt. Other than that, they've got less to work with than people think they believe.
It's interesting that you made that comment about Magneto, because I think that it folds into my issue with the adaptations that I've seen of this Jean Grey story, which are I'm getting some kind of cerebral thing going on here, but yeah, we have Magneto, who we got to see, you know, Auschwitz and all that kind of stuff.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies.
Yeah, exactly. We got to see, you know, all that, and so even when he's at the height of, you know, douchedom, we're still like, okay, but you know, he'd been through some stuff.
Right.
I don't have, nor have I ever had, for the cinematic Jean Grey that sympathy.
And it's hard to blame you because she's barely in the. I mean, like, she's in the first two, but, like, what is she other than the thing Wolverine pines after, even though she is spoken for?
Yeah, right? And if she's not that, like, I don't think that they did enough to lay the groundwork for us to miss her, let alone feel bad for her.
Right. It's a much denser story, and it's so hard to put together without a lot of commitment.
Yes.
But everyone's so quick to jump to it because it's a money maker of a story on paper.
So with that sympathy, do you find yourself on Jean's side? Or is all this like there's no amount of trauma in the world that can excuse the depths of this wigging out, of this Rumspringer of a
I think there's a debt that has to be paid for the fact that an entire race of people was obliterated.
Okay.
And like on a sympathetic level, yeah, it's hard to deal with. It's obviously like Jean Grey's hands are the ones that are dirty, but it is or isn't a outside force that is manipulating her. But at the same time, it is a problem she has to deal with, and a problem that isn't going away. And yeah, seemingly, if she still has to have that in her system, then she is culpable.
Yeah.
If she always is going to be the Phoenix, and she is always part of that problem.
Which doesn't make her a fun character to have around.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So I can definitely understand why.
It's very Hulk-esque.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very Hulk-esque. I find myself sympathizing for Jean, and if they want this next film to work, they're gonna need to work on that sympathy. They're gonna need to work on Cyclops and Jean, man. They're gonna need a whole hour of just those two.
Are they even together in that movie?
They're kind of flirty. They're kind of flirty. I think they're together. I gotta rewatch the Apocalypse, because it's been a while since I've seen it. But they're together. I'm pretty sure they're together. There's a scene of him not having his visor and she's moving his head. This is like a cutesy.
Yeah.
Thing. And so I think they're together, but they're gonna have to work on that. And again, they were kind of adults in both the story and the anime. Every kind of version that I've seen, they've been adults.
Yeah.
Where they're kind of be like young adults in this next Dark Phoenix movie.
We need to line up like important or iconic X-Men stories so we could here's other movies you can make.
Please. I want to. So if you guys have any recommendations, go ahead and let us know. let's end this with what part of this comic would you take to the Dark Phoenix film to be the sprinkles? What do you think is in this comic that can help that Dark Phoenix story do better?
The one we have coming up.
It's Dazzler, isn't it? No.
No, yes.
People are saying Dazzler might make it random ass.
I keep hearing that, and I was just like, sure, whatever. Yeah. If that's what you guys want.
Alison Blair, baby. Show me the CD nightclub. Show me all the debauchery. I want to see all of it.
If I were able to rip out something from here, I guess it would be, some level of like non-culpability that can salvage the character. But then again, it's like it's the last movie, so what does it all matter?
If it's not the intergalactic people coming down to make her pay for her sentence, who else would it be? The government?
If it's the government, though, but then
she would just kill the government because she just blows.
Well, not even just that, but then if it's the government, then the government's right, and then like,
oh yeah,
mutants are bad.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, because she could just. What if she just walked into any one of our houses? You know, all that stuff, huh? Damn. Yeah, I really wonder what they could. Like I said, I say you work on that relationship. I say you do all the stuff with the eyes, the vista, all that stuff there, as much as you can, and work on the rapport of the team. I think what really made this story work was that everyone felt like they were on the same team.
Yes.
Even when they were making fun of each other, even when they were getting frustrated with one another, they felt like a family. They felt lived in. It didn't feel like it was anybody's first day.
I think the best thing you could probably do is at least, create that, or try the best to fake that family element that was supposed to be between Jean Grey and the X-Men, and just leave Magneto and whoever the heck
his people are. Xavier?
Jessica Chastain or whatever.
Yeah, whoever she is.
Whoever that actress is playing.
Right.
And leave them as the people who are coercing Jean into this bad situation. Other than that, how it ends, I don't know. I can barely tell who the antagonists are other than
it's
Jean.
Gonna be her, yeah, man. It's gonna be Jean. How do you feel about the idea of the psychic dampeners? Is that a short-term solution?
Always.
Or was he always meaning to get to that and gonna deal with that? Or was Xavier just like, whenever this bomb blows up, odds are it won't be near me, so I don't got nothing to worry about?
I always figured that it was a solution that was supposed to be like short-term and
finger in the dam kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then she kills everybody, you know?
And then the dam breaks.
And then a billion people die, and then Jim Shooter. So, yeah, I heard that Jim Shooter was all like, you guys need to do something to her. She needs to pay for this.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what the heck you want us to do? And he's like, the Shi'ar will grab her, they'll lock her up, they'll imprison her, and they'll torture her for, like, some extended amount of time. And they're like, no, that's stupid. And they're like, well, she has to pay. And then John Byrne was like, well, then we'll kill her. And then he's like, yeah, you go do that. And then they killed her. Then they killed her. And then Jim Shooter was like, why'd you go and do that for?
But then I've also heard that they wanted to bring her back, and
they did. Yeah, they did.
And Shooter's whole thing was just like, if you can find a way to not make her culpable for those crimes, then you can bring her back.
Yes,
you have to clean her slate.
I think, and again, I'm not well versed in this, but I think what ended up happening was they were like, when she was in space and the Phoenix Force saw her, they made a duplicate body. Yeah. The Phoenix inhabited the duplicate body, whereas the regular Jean Grey...
Comic book's favorite backup. It was the clone.
Yes. And so the evil clone of Jean Grey is one who killed everybody. Meanwhile, regular Jean Grey's in a cocoon in the Jamaica Bay. So, yeah, you do with that as you will.
Clones.
But I'm actually very happy we got to read this story. It's one of the ones... It was
an experience.
It's historic. I think it reads well besides all the constant exposition. I did have some of my favorite...
believers.
I did have some of my favorite moments. I finding myself surprised, anxious, all those emotions that I should feel. And I definitely ended up just kind of feeling sorry for Jean. And I think that's what they wanted in this. She becomes a very tragic character from the beginning to the end of this story. And when you think that ultimately she becomes what she is because she gave in,
I think what the books always is what the movies have always missed. And that is mostly a story about the team.
Yes.
And not about a few particular characters we like on the team and their friends.
Yeah, Logan and friends. Always.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to a point where you don't know what to do with Iceman for 3 films,
right,
that tells you something. Come on, like get with the program. But yeah, this is gonna be our last podcast on the road to Dark Phoenix. We'll be covering Dark Phoenix next week, so make sure you guys get your tickets for the final installment of the Fox X-Men movie franchise. Holy hell.
Kind of, sort of.
Damn near 20 years. Damn near 20 years in this franchise. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we do know the very next and last step is the Dark Phoenix Saga or the Dark Phoenix film.
Say what you want. It's an impressive accomplishment.
It is, man. It is. After looking back, it's easy to dog them. It's very easy to dog them. But when you look at it back, before there was a Marvel Cinematic Universe, there was an X-Men movie universe.
And it's always proved to me what I thought, that the X-Men could always exist outside of the rest of the Marvel Comics continuity because it is so dense and full of its own culture community of people. It's funny
that you say that because I definitely I feel for that reading this. Never did they say this event happened in Avengers versus the Sentinels.
The only passing thing is that Beast is over here with the Avengers, and it really could have been Beast is over here with anyone.
Yeah, literally. Or he's at his own house. He's at home.
Beast is, Beast is underground with the Morlocks.
That's it. Beast got fired on his day off, so he's just home hanging out. But yeah, like very few titles get to have these big arcs.
Yes.
That don't involve everyone.
No, right.
And so the idea that this Phoenix Force that ends up becoming such a big threat that when you get to Avengers vs. X-Men is tearing the Marvel Universe apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool that that Chris Claremont and John Byrne got to handle this in their own secluded story. I thought that was pretty cool.
And a cast of characters that sometimes gets their own secluded spaces, like no one else goes to Genosha. That's a mutant thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it gets secluded. I wonder if they're gonna end up doing the same thing when they get brought into the MCU.
Not at all.
How secluded? How much?
Not that.
Are they gonna be rubbing shoulders with everybody? And you know what happens if we get a new MCU X-Men? If we get a new MCU Jean Grey, we start our clocks again. And we say, when are we going to get that Phoenix?
This would be dangerous, and I doubt it, but I would not be surprised if the X-Men is essentially the Avengers of a new generation, in a sense.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
It would be difficult to do, because now, are you suggesting we build up stories of separate mutants to get to this X-Men film? Not necessarily, but in a sense, I could see the big movie event being big X-Men story.
Yeah. Bigger than the other X-Men stories you would have done to introduce everybody.
Right.
I can totally dig that. And like I said,
big Team Avengers story, big Team X-Men story.
Reading this, I definitely got the feeling that a lot took place before and a lot took place after, and I think that's the feeling you want to get because you want to then do that homework.
Yes.
And I hope that we get that same feeling when we get them in live action again. Mm-hmm. We get that feeling of like, wow, these guys are cool. They are multi-layered, and they are they are useful. And I hope you guys feel the same way about us. I hope you guys feel like we're multi-layered, cool, and useful. I want to go ahead and thank you guys for listening as far as you guys have. But if you like listening to the episode of the Major Issues Podcast, we are available wherever podcasts are found. That's Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Addict, the Apple Podcast app, available on all iDevices. But if all of that is too hard, just go to Google and type in Major Issues Podcast, and we're the first result to pop right up. Makes me so happy every time I type in Major, or when I type in Major Issues, and it says, do you want to put podcast in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It knows.
Go ahead.
It knows.
You know. And so, go listen to all the episodes. I'll just think about Major Issues. Listen to all the episodes of the Major Issues Podcast that we've gotten so far, especially the last episode that we did last week where we tackled the entire X-Men film franchise. I think this episode plus last week's episode are the perfect precursors to get ready to tackle Dark Phoenix next week.
In what is kind of sort of not really X-Men month, basically.
Yes. And when you've listened to all those episodes, make sure to come back next week for our Dark Phoenix episode, recapping and reviewing the 2019, like I said, probably swan song of the X-Men movie franchise.
The Logan verse.
Yes. More than
just New Mutants somehow escapes from its asylum.
It's gonna be Hugh Jackman again. Hugh Jackman's gonna show up again in
New Mutants.
Yes. He's gonna have a 5-second scene in the Weapon X gear, and he's just gonna run away again. A wild Wolverine appeared. Anyway, yeah, go to listen. I just gave you all the ways you could listen. Like I said, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, wherever podcasts are found. But if you want to speak, you can speak directly to us. You can get your opinions read on air of the Major Issues podcast. All you have to do is go to facebook.com/comicbookclick, Instagram @comicbookclick, or use the hashtag comicbookclick to talk about the newest, hottest, latest, and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media. We're at Major Issues CBC. I think you have one, sir.
I'm at Rebirth GT.
And we are constantly in there telling jokes, giving you guys the skinny on the newest episodes of Major Issues, sharing memes, and comic book news. So make sure you follow us wherever we are across all social media. And again, write into comicbookclick@gmail.com, and we will express your opinions here on air. Hopefully, we can get some opinions for Dark Phoenix when we come here next week, because I know I'm probably going to have a lot to say, good or bad. And so I hope that the rest of you guys do too. And I cannot wait. My name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don.
My name is Gregory Thomas, a.k.a. GT Rebirth.
And this has been our Dark Phoenix Saga comic book review. And remember, whether or not you're hiding concussive blasts behind ruby quartz, whether or not your entire body was grafted with adamantium, whether you bring the smell of hellfire and brimstone everywhere you bamf, whether you have the control of the winds and the lightning, or you're just a misunderstood girl with true power and true potential, remember, we are the Clique, and you, yes you, are worthy.
Bam.